So my name's Louisa Sangera, and Zippy Financial is my business, my brokerage. There's 16 of us, I think, altogether within the business. And I've also got Tracy online, who is one of my relationship managers. Tracy looks after a lot of the first home buyers. So she's come on as well to have a chat. She's going to do the question and answers. If you have got any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat as we go, and then we'll answer those at the end. Also joining us is Jason Martin. Jason is a Sydney buyer's agent. So Jason's come along just to give you some sort of hints and tips and chat you through a few things as well. Now, I have put a lot in these slides. I've put more than I'm actually going to talk about. The reason I've done that is I got carried away because I just wanted to tell you everything, but there's a lot to tell you. So I'm just going to skip through some of the slides, but we've got your email addresses and we've got everybody's email who hasn't even attended, because there's a lot of people registered that probably aren't attending. But we'll send this out so that you can all have a read in your own time and go through the full information. We're not adding you to marketing lists or anything. After we've sent the presentation out to you, you won't hear from us again. Obviously, you'll have us contact details. So if you do have any questions, you can always come back and ask any questions you want. So I was just going to go through a bit of jargon because I'm going to be using this as I go through the slides. So I just want to cover off LVR. So that's loan to value ratio. And to make it simple, if you were buying a house at $1 million and you were borrowing 800,000 against the $1 million property, that would be 80 LVR. So that's what LVR is. Lender's mortgage insurance, you'll hear me saying LMI, and that is the bank's insurance. So every mortgage is insured. The bank has to insure the debt. They pay the lender's mortgage insurance up to 80% LVR. Once it gets to 80% LVR, the banks kindly pass on the fee of the insurance to the clients. So that's, you'll hear me saying LMI as well. You'll hear me talking about principal. That is the actual base amount of the loan. And then on top of that, obviously, you have the interest. Security, when I'm saying security, that is the house itself or the property. That is the security. And we will talk about family pledge and parental guarantees later as well. So I'll skip through that. So people obviously come to us all the time. This is the first question is usually, how much can I borrow? Now, what you can borrow will depend on what you're comfortable with. So what you're comfortable with might not be what the bank will lend you. Some of the banks are very, very generous on the borrowing capacity. So we say to everybody, you've got to be comfortable with the repayments yourself. So run your cash flow, look at what spare cash you have, come up with a figure that you're comfortable paying on the mortgage and stick to it. Don't get carried away and overstretch yourselves. Okay. And you've got to keep in mind that interest rates do go up and down. So if they go down, you're laughing. You'll be able to either not pay as much or you can pay your mortgage off faster. And if interest rates go up, obviously, your installments are going to be a little bit higher. So you need to make sure that you're looking at that as well and that you can afford it if it goes up 1, 2, 3%. The banks do look at that in their calculations as well. So just keep it realistic. How much deposit's required? I will be talking about the current scheme that's running from the government in a few moments, a few minutes time. But generally, the maximum LVR that you can get on a mortgage is 95%. And so you need 5% genuine savings. That means that the money has to be in your bank account for at least 3 months. Some banks will consider gifts. There's not a lot, but they will consider gifts from people, but that entails you getting a stat deck stating that it's a non-refundable gift, so you can't have a loan. The banks don't like that. With the family guarantees that are available, and we'll talk about that, say, in a few minutes' time, you don't need a deposit. So if you haven't got a deposit, but you've got a guarantor, you're covered. And with this current first home guarantee scheme, it's also a minimum 5% deposit. Choosing the right loan, this is where, you need to have discussions with your bank or your broker, whoever you're dealing with, about whether, you go fixed rate, variable rate, whether you go part fixed, part variable. And that will depend on what the market's like at the time. So right now, most people are going variable rate. We have got some clients wanting to fix in just for 1 year, or even some are doing 2 year, because there's some good 1 year fixed rates. So that's for a discussion at the time. You do need to think about the costs involved, and there's a list of some of the costs. So as well as your deposit, you need to allow money for pest and build inspections, stamp duty, conveyancing fees, insurance that you're going to have to take out, because the banks advise you that you've got to take out buildings insurance to cover the home. Contents is optional. And then you might want to increase your life insurance and income protection. And obviously, wherever you're living now, you're going to have to pay to move. So you need your moving costs. Lots of people do think they can't afford a property. And they come to us saying, am I out of my mind? Am I being totally unrealistic? And I always say, where there's a will, there's a way. And it might not be that you can afford one right now. It might not work. But if we get a plan together and work it out, at some stage, hopefully you'll be able to get a property. We've worked with people for 2-3 years longer, actually. So you've just got to save, do everything you can to get cash together. So if you've got a tax refund, save it. If you're thinking of going on holiday, perhaps don't do the holiday, save that money. Sell everything you've got in the house that you don't need. And I do talk about that because it always makes me smile, because I've had clients come back and said, I can't believe it, Louisa. Like, I did what you said. I've sold this out my garage and this, and I've sold this, and I sold the kids' toys, and I sold these clothes. The most I've ever had a client come back and say that this they got was $10,000 just from clearing out the house. But it was $10,000 towards a deposit. So, sell everything. Just be creative and think how you can get the money together. Now, I mentioned the parental guarantor. We actually have parental and family guarantors. So if you don't have a deposit, this is an option. So if you've got a parent or a family member that will put their house up against part of the loan, that might be an option for you. So the way that works is that you have 2 loans, and you avoid paying LMI as well this way. So you'll have an 80% loan, which is against the property that you're buying. And then you'll have a 20% loan, which is also against the property you're buying. But the parents' or the family's property is also put up against that portion of the loan. So anything over 80% LVR is guaranteed by the parent or family member, but you don't need to have a deposit if that is the way that you decide to go. Now, it isn't just about giving a property. There are different things that the lenders look at. So they do look, if the parents did lose the property in this transaction, could they live the rest of their lives comfortably? So they do look at savings, they look at the supers, people sometimes say, why are they looking at that? But they need to make sure that the parents can still live a life if they did lose the house in this transaction. I mean, we've never had anybody, obviously, in that position. And generally, the way that house prices have been rising in the last 12 years, I've been a broker, we've released parents very, very quickly. So as soon as your property gets to 80 LVR, we can release the parents or the family member. And I don't know, but I reckon we've probably got 1 or 2 clients maximum currently in our whole book that have still got the parents on as guarantors, because we've just released them all. So a lot of parents think that they're guaranteeing the whole mortgage as well, and it's really important to explain to them, hey, it's only a small portion that you're guaranteeing, not the whole thing. Now, the first home guarantee scheme, which everybody's talking about, and I do think it's fantastic. Look, it's been around a while, but there's been really big changes since the 1st of October, which makes it a lot more accessible to people. So the benefits of this scheme are that the LMI is waived, which is a massive saving. We're talking, I mean, that is thousands and thousands of dollars saving. You only need 5% deposit. And the good thing for me as a broker that I like is that my clients are getting the 80% LVR interest rates. They're not getting the 95% interest rates, because generally, if you come and you want a 95 loan, it's a much higher interest rate than an 80% rate, which a lot of people don't realise. So great, say that is thousands of dollars in itself, just getting that cheaper interest rate. And obviously, you can gain a house today rather than keep saving and saving and saving. You know, people say to me all the time, when's the best time to buy, Louisa? Is now a good time? And I always say, look, the best time was 10 years ago, but we're at where we're at. So let's get in the market. And I can honestly say I've never known anybody go wrong by getting into the market on a 5% deposit, because you're going to build equity in the property, which is making you money. The benefits of this scheme, there's no place limits. So it isn't like only so many people can get into it. There's no income caps either, so it doesn't matter how much you earn. And the property price caps are a reasonable level. But because of the levels, we are finding there are a lot of people are still, you know, saying, oh, I'm still not qualifying for the scheme. You know, in Sydney, I want to go up to 2.5 million. So they're having to go down the normal route rather than onto the scheme. And there's 30 banks participating in the scheme, and you know, all the big banks are there, so you've got a good choice. Now, if you can't borrow the money that you want to borrow for the area you're living in, I mean, me personally, I live on Sydney Northern Beaches, and you know, it's expensive. So a lot of people can't afford to buy a house. So what they do, they rent where they want to live, because they, you know, they obviously love it there. So they rent, but then they buy a property elsewhere that they can afford. So that might be Queensland, it might be Perth's been very popular for a few years. A lot of people are now looking at Melbourne again, because Melbourne's been pretty quiet, and they reckon that, you know, it might be taking off. So they'll rentvest, they'll buy a property elsewhere, and you can buy a lot cheaper properties, you know, out of Sydney. So that is a big option for a lot of people, lots of advantages to rentvesting. I've put some hints and tips on here, and this is probably something for you to read in your own time when I send you the presentation through, but just hints and tips on how to prepare yourself for a mortgage. You know, a lot of people come to us with huge limits on credit cards, and they'll go, oh, I don't owe anything. And we go, yeah, but you know, a 15,000 credit card will reduce your borrowing capacity by about 100,000. So we spend a lot of time reducing card limits. You know, people say, you know, can you use my bonuses? Can you use my overtime? We can, but we've got to go to the right banks. We've got to have a 6-day here at my brokerage to work. So we just look at the policies and we go and find the right people or the right banks that work for you, depending on your circumstances. But, you know, banks will take child support, your rental income, if you've got any investment properties already or something. So you can have a glance through some of these hints and tips. HEX debts, there's been a big change on HEX debts recently, which is fantastic. That's really helping out a lot of our first home buyers. So some of the banks are excluding HEX debts even from the calculations. That has just made a massive difference to people's borrowing capacity. So if you've looked at it before and you had a HEX debt, it might be worth re-looking at your debt servicing now with the recent changes. And we talked about security being the property that you're buying. Remember that the banks don't all take all securities. So some banks don't take company titles, they won't take heritage listing. They might have a postcode issue. They go, we're not lending in that postcode, or they might have a building issue where they're going, we've already got 30% of mortgages in that building. We're not lending anymore. We're not doing any more apartments. You know, so that's where you have to go and speak to your broker or your bank when you found a property and check that they're happy with the security. So that's a really good little tip, because a lot of people don't realise that one. So have a look through these hints and tips. And all I would say is, if for an investor, if you are going to go down the investor route for your first property rather than an owner occupied, it's a very different ball game being an investor. I'm an investor, I've got properties in 4 states. Love investing and I love investors. But you know, you're of a different mindset. So you're not buying a home. I don't even see my properties. I don't fly to Brisbane. I don't fly to Perth. I look at it on paper. Is this going to make money for me? Is it going to grow? You know, and it's a business as such, really. So think very differently. You have to look at who's going to live there. What type of person do you want living in the investment property? What would they be looking for? And then go and buy the right property. And you've got to do your research, and you've got to research, learn about investing as much as you possibly can before you jump in. A lot of people do get it wrong. You're not always guaranteed to make money in investing. So do your research, find the right people. I always say investors need a team, and the team would be a broker, a very good accountant that's into investing, and a buyer's agent. And we've got one on tonight that can sort of go through investing as well. Jason will go through that, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. Why use a mortgage broker rather than go directly into your bank? When you walk in your bank, they've got limited products. When you come to a broker, we've got, well, Zippy's got 60 plus banks. A lot of brokers will generally have between 25 banks and 60 banks. The franchises tend to not have a lot, like your, Mortgage Choice or Rams or whatever. They don't have a lot of banks, but the independent brokers do tend to have a lot more. A broker will save you time. They'll reduce the stress. They're going to do all the paperwork. They're going to educate you and teach you how it's done. They're like your project manager. They're going to speak to your conveyancer, the bank solicitors. They're going to try and get you a better rate. If you're an investor, they're going to structure you correctly, because structure is very important on your debt when you're an investor. And they'll understand your borrowing power. And if they're honest with you, and I'm certainly honest with all my clients, sometimes I have to go to people, you're stretching yourself too much. In my view, you're stretching yourself too much. And I try and explain why. If they want the lifestyle they've currently got, perhaps they're taking on too much debt. So, we've got the clients back, and we're going to be paid by whichever bank you go to anyway. It makes no difference to us. We're going to be paid by the bank, but we've got your back, and we want to keep you as a client forever. So we're going to look after you. And like in my business, we reprice our clients' mortgages at least every 6 months. So we're going back and we're going to the bank, hey, reduce our rate, or we're taking them here. So we're negotiating to keep your rate down all the time. You won't get it in a bank. They're never going to phone you up and go, oh, we've reduced your rate for you. Doesn't happen. So how do you find a reliable one? Obviously, friends, family, colleagues, look at testimonials, check the LinkedIn, look what experience they've got. Have they been around a while so they know what they're doing? When you do something for a long time, you get good at it. Are they qualified? It's not, a couple of years. It takes you a couple of years to get your diploma if you do it online, but most brokers have got the diploma. But pick up the phone and speak to them and see if you're comfortable with them, and ask them the process. Are you just dealing with that person? You're dealing with a team? I will say that when I was on my own, I didn't work as fast. The more staff that I've brought on, the faster we can work. And that's a client actually named me Zippy with the speed that we work at. So, I'm amazed when I see people that come to me and they go, my broker's on holiday for 3 weeks, so I've got nobody to ask. And I think, oh, but if I go on holiday or whatever, there's a team of people there still to back up and keep things going. But ask the broker, what are your fees? A lot of brokers now do charge, because our costs of doing mortgage have gone up significantly. And we've got things in now that, like, if you put money in your offset account, if you put 50,000 in your offset account, I have to pay $50,000 for commission back. So for various little, things that have happened to brokers, some are charging. So always ask if they do charge fees. And we don't. I don't have to, because we're one of the biggest brokerages, we're in the top 1% in the country. I don't need to charge fees. So we're still doing it all free. But yeah, definitely ask how many lenders they've got access to. Obviously, if they've got 60 banks rather than 35, you're going to have a lot better selection of banks, especially if your scenario is a bit quirky or there's something different. You know, we might have to take it to a non-conforming lender to try and get it over the line. So that's my little presentation to give you some hints, tips, some guidance. I'm going to invite Jason now to spend 5 minutes just talking to you about buyer's agents and the value that they add to clients. We see it day in, day out, how much value a buyer's agent adds and how much money they save our clients. So I was a bit skeptical, I'll be honest, sorry, Jason, about buyer's agents when I first became a broker. And there wasn't a lot around 12 years ago. There's a lot of newbies coming to the industry the last few years. And I would encourage you to really thoroughly check out the buyer's agent you're going to. And I would advise you not to use a new one. You need somebody that's got experience, somebody that's been around a bit. You want to be seeing what properties they've bought in that area, and you need to ask them a lot of questions. You need to be interviewing your buyer's agent. But certainly we see them saving our clients a significant amount of money. So I wanted Jason just to come on for 5 minutes because I think he can give you some useful information. So over to you, Jason.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you, Louisa, and the Zippy Financial team for having me. My name is Jason Martin from Property Buyer Advantage. We're Sydney buyers agents, but the information I'm going to give you is applicable Australia-wide. Look, I guess the value that a quality buyer's agent brings to the equation is about sourcing quality property, evaluating it, and negotiating it for pricing better than what you could. So, if I can say to you from a sourcing point of view, we look at off-market, pre-market, and of course on-market. The pre-market and off-market comes from our relationships with agents. Invariably they'll ring us first to see if we do have a qualified buyer that, may be waiting before they go to the market. And invariably we buy a lot of property that way. Pre-market tends to be an area which a lot of people dismiss, but I like pre-market because you do have some owners that basically they're coming to market no matter what. But if I can actually view the property a couple of weeks before everybody else, I've already done the due diligence and, we're well underway in terms of negotiating the property before the first inspection. When I talk to you about the evaluation side of it, we're basically looking at the building that you're buying, whether that's a home or an apartment building. We're looking at the land component that it's on. Is it affected by anything in a negative way? We're looking at the locality. Is it flood affected? There's areas and there's areas, if I can say that. And within particular suburbs, there's good parts and average parts. And we want to make sure that you're always buying in the good part. From a negotiation point of view, we've been doing this for 30 years. And we believe that we can, get a price much better than sort of any of our clients can. And the one thing I really love hearing from clients over the years is they always say to me, or invariably say to me, Jason, we would have paid more for that. I've come up with a few case studies which just might highlight that for you and put it in more practical terms. They're all recent ones that we've been involved in. We were basically on the Northern Beaches. We were asked to source a property in Narrowena recently. The agent was quite adamant in their approach to us, saying that they won't be accepting anything under $2.5 million. If I can say half the battle being a good buyer's agent is understanding the agents you're working with and reading the room. He might have been adamant about the $2.5 million. Our buyer was only working with a budget of 2.45. So we had a $50,000 shortfall. After several weeks of not a lot of action from the agent's point of view, we secured that property at $2,305,000, which was actually $145,000 under what our client was happy to pay. Now, that happens sort of day in, day out. the savings vary greatly. If I can say to you, they range from tens of thousands to millions in some instances. But, from a first home buyer's point of view, a couple of really interesting ones that we've had recently was we were called in to buy a townhouse up on the North Shore, and agents being agents, they were saying to us, look, the last two sold in the complex for $1,050,000. I'm pretty well a really nice guy. If you offer $1,030,000, I'm sure I can secure it for you. Once again, it's about timing. We let 12 days go by exactly until the agent started to chase us. And once again, to cut a long story short, we bought that property for $950,000, which is technically, $80,000 under. And I get several calls every year from people like that to just say, we got a new kitchen, we got a new bathroom, just in the savings that you actually were able to obtain for us. One area that I really want to address that is more and more prevalent, I've got to say, these days is I spend half my time talking people out of buying property. And that might sound like a strange thing to do from a buyer's agent point of view, but as I said, I'm about buying quality property in quality locations. Now, to give you some examples of that, we had a client that came to us not so long ago, 3 or 4 months ago. They basically said to us, Jason, we love property. Do you mind if we look in conjunction with you? They found what they told me was their dream property and called me out to have a look at it to try and secure it for them. I walked around that building. It was a brand new unit complex, so never lived in. Walked around it, came back out the front to them and pretty well said to them, you can't buy this place. There are so many building faults here, it's not funny. Mm-hmm. They said to me, aren't you even going to come inside and look at the unit? And I said, no, I don't need to. They said, please just come and have a look. It is our dream property. So I went in and had a look, took them through the place room by room just to show them where the quality was lacking. They still wanted to pursue the property, much to, I guess, me arguing otherwise. I said, well, look, just hold on a moment. I'll call the strata manager that's been appointed and let's see what they've got to say. I rang that strata manager who, lucky enough, I knew them. And the first thing I said to them, when do the special levies start? And they go, Jason, it's a brand new building. How can there be special levies? I go, when do the special levies start? And I didn't let it go. I pressed them. And eventually they said to me, between you and I, which unit are you looking at? I said, unit 16. And he said to me, we're expecting the AGM in about 6 months' time, and we think if we can't make a claim on the home warranty insurance, the special levy for that unit will be $137,000. Now, that's a young couple that had a 1.3 budget, and that was every cent they had, and they were staring down the barrel of over another 100,000, let's call it over the next 2 years. That's what it's about, avoiding those sort of pitfalls. If I can say to you, those same people, I found another place that looked worthwhile. I'm sure most people in Sydney are familiar with Mascot Towers. There was basically a Minister of Parliament appointed to oversee, I'll say, poor building practices moving forward from there. We looked at another building. It looked great on face value until we went to the car park, but it still looked good on face value. Nothing in the strata report, nothing in the building report that mentioned anything. Dug, found out that Minister of Parliament was actually appointed to that building for 10 years worth of remedial work. Now, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, once again, that someone will have to come up with, which they shouldn't have to come up with. It's about understanding the areas that your buyer's agent is working in, making sure they know it intimately. There's not too many buildings that I don't know from an apartment-wise on the North Shore and the northern beaches of Sydney that I can't tell you about. I know the building practices. Should I say, personally, I almost wouldn't be buying anything after the year 2000. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but, I wouldn't because I've just found there's a real letdown in building practices from that period onwards. to give you, I guess, probably one or two final case studies, we bought a property in Davidson recently. The brief was to buy a lovely house up in the Forest area, and I think we had to use our whole skill set on this particular one. The first one was we were told we couldn't buy it under 2.8. Then the agent became our friend and said that we could buy it at 2.75 a month later. Our client said buy it at 2.75. They're very comfortable with that. Much their dismay, we made them wait another 2 weeks, which their anxiety levels were very high. But saying that to you, we bought that for 2,695, which saved them $55,000 there. But where I'm saying we had to use all the skills there, we organised quotes for carpet and paint and things like that, and found out very quickly that the owner wasn't too willing to let us in to get quotes and things like that. So eventually we had to pretty well get the solicitor to get us access. I won't say they were undesirable, but, you know, you could see there was an issue there in some form. When we purchased the property, we told them that we needed to have the, I guess, the filter system and actually the pool fountain fixed because they weren't working. Now, we got an assurance that that was going to be fixed. We turned up for the final inspection on settlement day. Walking through the garage, there was the motor for the fountain sitting on the ground there. Nothing had taken place. He actually rang our solicitor 3 days before to say the work had taken place. It hadn't taken place. And that sort of put me on high alert. I said to the client, there's something else here. We need to just find it. They'd already been through and said, Jason, it's fine. We're very happy with the place. I said, there's something else here. We just need to find it. Now, going through the place, went upstairs, come across the keypad for the air conditioning, push, 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 nothing for ducted air. The owner very quickly said, we're trying to save money. We turned it off at the box and the switch has been flicked. So I went and had a look at that. That wasn't true. We were able to ascertain when I went down and had a look at the box that the aircon was not working at all. Now, that's an expensive exercise when it's ducted throughout a home. Immediately rang the solicitor, told them to hold back $30,000 for both aircon and that pool fountain. Got a tradesperson out, verified that it didn't work. In addition to the $55,000 saving, we got $27,000 back for that air conditioning. Now, we could have just accepted and walked straight out because our client was very happy. But as I said, sometimes experience is worth something. Probably the final one that I'll have to you, and it comes down to local knowledge. A client of ours is very happy to buy a place which they thought was a quiet location. They were from interstate, and I sort of explained to them that it's a cut-through road for peak hour. So their quiet late location for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening changes. They were skeptical about that, so I got them to go and sit there in the morning and the evening, and they counted 192 cars past their property. And let's just say that they didn't purchase it. So if I can say to you, there's probably a lot more that goes into the buyer's agent side of things than most people sort of credit. But as I said, all I say is make sure your buyer's agent has been around, understands the area that they operate in, and they're probably going to save you a lot of future heartache. If anyone does have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. But otherwise, thank you, Louisa.
You are welcome. Thank you, Jason. And yeah, we see the value, especially getting the off-market properties that, they're not, if you're looking for a house, you're not going to see the off-markets unless you're using a buyer's agent. I say to everyone, do you want to see all the properties? If you do, you need a buyer's agent. And we see the buyer's agents, saving 50 or 100,000. My client will go, I was happy to pay, 980, but the agent said buyer's agent said 880, and they got it. And I go, yeah, that's what they do. They'd have paid a lot more money. So I totally get it. And thank you very much for that. All right. So Tracy's online. Is there any questions anybody wants to ask? Is there anything in the chat there, Tracy?
Yeah, there's one in the chat from Sue. With a parental guarantor, what is the criteria, and do they have to live in Australia? Yes, they do. So Well, the property has to be in Australia. So, yeah, usually with the parental guarantor, they'll have a look at, it depends on the lender. Some are more lenient than others. But from our perspective, we look at the guarantor and make sure that they're happy to be a guarantor. So there has to be a separate interview. There can be no coercion. If you're going to be a guarantor, you've also got to consider what your plans are for the future, because you are putting your property up for collateral security. So if you're looking to sell in the next 2 to 3 years, it may not be the right option for you. Some lenders won't take the guarantor's owner-occupied property. They want an investment property, whereas other lenders will actually take the owner-occupied property. Usually, because it is an Australian mortgage, the property has to be in Australia.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Tracy. Any more questions, anybody, before we wrap it up? No? Okay, I think we are all done. So you've got Jason's contact details there. Obviously, where's Zippy Financial? If you do want one of us or the relationship managers to talk you through anything, feel free to give us a buzz. We'll send you this presentation out so that you can have a good look through it. Any questions, let us know. Otherwise, good luck with your property purchases. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks and good night.